Hello, friends. So, Bible study, NIV, John, chapter 19, which we will finish today. It's 23 through 42. We won't do all of that in this one video. We will go through the rest of the parable called the Crucifixion, and then we will move through the death of Jesus, and then in a separate video we'll do the burial of Jesus. So I felt it was very important to stop yesterday at Pilate and his answered, "What I have written," because he was glorifying Jesus in death there, which is part of the prophecies. See, the Pharisees are running around trying to manipulate the things so that they have everything that they want without any of their hands looking like they're dirty. But it's not working, because the people they need to be compliant and fall prey to their maneuverings, it isn't working. Which is always how it is. People have a good nose for BS, and they can feel when something's off, and they know, there's always going to be some of them that know when to be suspicious. And that's why it's always just best to be who you are and let your work stand for itself and not really worry about the court of public opinion. You're not for everyone. And I have to tell you, that brings me a great deal of joy that I don't have to try. So all the rest of this that's happening here has to do with fulfillment of the scriptures, even though it might seem quite insulting. Verse 23, when the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, that would be normal for them, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each, with the undergarment remaining. So that would be the under robe, because there's outer robes and inner robes. So this is essentially like a robe version of long johns, if you need a reference. That's basically what this would be. This garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. And that is something. I don't know who that artist is, but that is something. Because that's, well, I can't. But then I don't know how to weave materials anyway. I don't have a loom. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I've seen the little kits of things, but I don't really need that many pot holders. So I can't imagine. It must be very fine material. Let's not tear it, they said to one another. Let's decide by lot who will get it. And you're like, why would they tear it in the first place? Nothing was wasted in those days. Resources were hard to come by. Think about the level of callousness that you have to have, that you're dividing up somebody's materials and you're going to be gambling underneath the person who's actively dying that stuff was, who's like behind you up there dying. And you're going to gamble for their possessions because you stripped them off them. There's a level of callousness there. This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled, which said, they divided my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing. So this was predicted already. And not necessarily by Jesus, because there's been a lot of different prophets in the Jewish culture that have predicted a lot of things. Remember, the Gospel of John is written for somebody who is already a believer. So this is all just meant to reinforce. They assume that you know the prophecies to start off with. That's really what that means. So this is what the soldiers did, yeah. Near the cross, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple who he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Dear woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. And that would be very important, because they would have no protection, no safety otherwise. They weren't allowed to own property, so they could rent and find a way to pay for that rent in town, essentially. They could work. Jewish women most definitely worked. There was all kinds of talk of that in the Old Testament, in which they would go out to the fields, and there would be men workers that would go out to the fields over here on this side, and the women were supposed to stay away from them because they were rapey. And then on this side, over on this other side, there would be women workers who were doing the same thing, like kind of harvesting, fruits and vegetables and, whatever the work was. Now, that would there be some label of farm sort of labor that they wouldn't have given the women to do? Yeah. But a person who is prosperous and who doesn't own a bunch of slaves, but also doesn't want to have the responsibility of cleaning their house, would hire in people to do these things, have servants to do them, people in their employ. So she's old though. Jesus is 30. She's not really fit for working. So she has to live with somebody in order to survive. So he made sure she was taken care of. That would have been considered the honorable thing to do. This next parable is the death of Jesus. Verse 28. Later, knowing all was now completed, so that the scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, I am thirsty. A jar of wine vinegar was there, so sour wine. So wine that is almost basically expired, because wine that has gone bad is vinegar. Alcohol comes from distilling hydrogen and oxygen together, which also is part of how you make vinegar in the first place. So they come from each other. So they soak a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of hyssop plant, which is actually a flower, so I find that very interesting, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he received the drink, Jesus said, it is finished. With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath, because the Jews did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath. It's a bummer for their party to have this reminder up there of, murder and things. They asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. Now, why the legs broken? I mean, I guess so that they could get it because they're nailed. Their feet are nailed in order to get it off the cross. But I know that seems very intellectual for such a cruel thing. My brain can't fathom what function that serves other than extra cruelty. But if they're asking for it, then it probably serves some sort of function. Why would they do this? Doesn't make any sense to me. The soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then those of the other. It's like they're trying to check to see if they're still alive or something, because that would be quite painful. If you were still alive, you'd make noises. But when they came to Jesus and found he was already dead, they did not break his legs, so it's not a physical function. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with the spear. That spear is now called the spear of destiny, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. That's what would happen with any of us if he pierces there. The man who saw it had given testimony, and his testimony is true. Like, he's not one of us. This is just what happened. So he's saying, like, this came from somebody who was there, who has no ulterior motive. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you may believe. Now, there's some people that believe that this is just John's testimony, and Mother Mary was handed off to, John the Apostle to take care of. These things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. No, that's got a sub thing down here. B37. Oh, that's from Zechariah 12:10. And as another scripture says, they look on the one they have pierced. And that is what's true. He got pierced in the side. So let's remember, if we're going to go about our day and we're going to try to push and pull and maneuver people into places, they might not go where we think they're going to go, because people are not really meant to be manipulated that way. If you've got a reason why something needs to be, you should be able to voice it authentically without playing political theater. Understand that regardless of what side, and I'm on I don't like politicians' side. That's what side I'm on. No matter what side on any equation that you're maneuvering around here, those things have been, people have been doing that, political manipulation, since way back before us. Way back before now. None of these systems and processes are new. They are worried about the cult of personality. All this, because the power structure between the Roman and the Jewish Pharisees was in a sensitive place, and they couldn't afford him to arrive when he did. But he arrived exactly when he did because the corruption was so terrible. And the casual treatment of human life was so terrible. As bad as you might think are now, they were far worse then. Because there were no police. You had to depend upon the Roman soldiers to care if one Jewish person was brutalizing another one, or you had to hope that the Pharisees liked you better than that person. That's what they were living in. That's why he had to come. So let's remember that. He gave his life so we would have a chance of living in a different type of system where we could live with truth and authenticity. Let's not slide backwards into the devil rule, where the cult of personality is the only thing that matters. And I need my opinion to be the correct one in all moments. And if you give me any inputs that might disagree with that, I'm going to deny the light of truth. God only dwells in the light of truth. And if you want to be close to him, the light of truth can be the only thing you're seeking. People are messy. The second coming has not happened. If someone's in a vessel, they are not perfect. Slow down. Don't put your faith in a human being. It's not worth it. That's not even what he wants. The only person you're supposed to have unconditional trust for is him. Everybody else, you ask some questions. And you remember that you're a human and they're a human. So that means none of you are perfect.